In the last two videos, we have made a great deal of progress in our application, and now what we need to do is modify the classes so that we can implement the relationships between the two classes so that we have a one-to-many between the customer and the address. So let's get started on that. So we come over here to the customer side first, and we need to add a couple of things here. First, for the database, we need to add a generated value annotation. This will tell the system, the Spring framework, a little bit about what we're doing with the database, how the ID is going to be used. So we really just need these two things like that. The next thing that we need to do in this class is we need to find, well, actually what we need to do first is this. We need to create a variable to hold our addresses, and we're going to use a set in this case and just call it addresses. And let's do the import there. And a set is pretty much like a list. The difference is, though, that a set insists on having only unique values. So you can't have duplicate values in a given set. You can in a list. So since we want the addresses to be unique, we want to use a set versus a list or some other data structure. And then we're going to need to add getters and setters for this. So let's do that. And let's see, I need to move this back up. It always does this. It puts it in the wrong place. So we want that up there. And now you notice here that there is a red line under this. And that's, if you look at the error, it says the basic attribute type should not be a container. Well, it turns out this isn't actually a basic attribute type. This is going to be involved in the relationship. And that's these other things down here, these are just simple attributes in the database. So this is fundamentally different. And that's why that error is showing up there. So on this side, we're going to say that it's a one-to-many relationship. And then we can parameterize this a little bit. We can say that we want it to be a fetch type of eager, which means that it's going to, when you do a query on it, it's going to grab everything that it can. We want to say it's going to be mapped by a variable called customer, and that's in the other class, okay, on the other side of that one-to-many. And then cascade type all. What that means is that if we have, for example, if we have a customer class and we decide to delete it, that it should cascade through and delete all the addresses. We need to do one additional thing here, which is when you set an address, you need to tell each address which customer it's related to. So what we'll do is modify this method just a little bit and say addresses dot for each, oops, and then we're going to use this as a lambda, right? So address, and then in here we're going to say address dot set customer this. And what that does is it sets each address with the customer that we're working on right at the moment. So now you have a relationship where when you set the addresses, the address object will also have the link back to the customer. Okay, so that's one side of it. Let's go over to the address side, and we need to do a couple of things here as well. So on the address side, let's see, we've got the ID. We also need to tell it that it's a generated value. And the strategy for generation is, again, identity. Okay, so we did that. And let's see, what else do we need to do? We need to add our customer. Come on, USTO, okay. So this is going to be our customer that is related to this set of addresses, right? And so again, what we want to do is create getters and setters for this. And let's move this variable up here. And again, this is going to give us this one of these errors where it says that it's a basic type and it shouldn't be there. So in this case, on this side, there are many of these to one customer. So we're going to do many to one. And we can put a cascade type in here if we want to. In the example code I gave you, I did have the cascade type set. But there's actually a problem with that. If you leave that in there, if you delete an address, it may delete the customer that it's related to. So we're just going to leave that blank. But we do need to tell it how we're going to join these things together. And so in this case, what we do is do the join column, name equals, and then we give it the name of the foreign key that we've set up. Okay. So that pretty much is it. We've got these two classes now set up where they should work together. Let's take a look at our list. Let's see, did we modify the ID annotations? Yes. So we did that. Did we add those? Yes. And did we add the annotations, the one-to-many? Yes. Okay, so we're in pretty good shape. So at this point, we're ready to start writing some code in our main class to actually use what we've done. So let's go over to the main class. So in the main class, we need to add a couple of variables first, member variables up here. So let's do that. So we're going to do one private customer repository. Just call it customer repository. Now, let's do one for the let's see, move this down a little bit. We'll do one for the address. Okay. Now, these classes actually represent the data access objects. Remember, customer repository actually technically is just an interface. So here's where a little bit of magic happens. This could be done through XML, and some of the examples you may see online are going to do that. But we're going to use the auto-wired attribute. Like that. And what that does is it allows the Spring framework to actually create or wire up access objects that use the customer repository, or that implement the customer repository, rather. So a lot of magic going on right behind there. We can actually use it without even creating a new one. So again, I'm not being very clear on this. Let's try this again. AutoWired allows the Spring framework to create one behind the scenes that implements this interface. We don't have to instantiate one. In fact, we can't. It's the wrong thing to do in this case. We can use it right away. So we could say that we want to, for example, delete when we start our app. Since we're just doing an example here, we can just start by deleting all of those things. Now let me remind you here, let's go back and look at the customer repository. There are no methods in here, right? The CRUD repository actually implements delete, well, create, read, update, delete, right? So we don't even have to do that method, and the Spring framework instantiates the object. So a lot of magic going on right here. Let's try running it and just see if things are going to work. Maybe we've forgotten something. Okay, so far it looks pretty good. All right, so we don't have a problem so far. Now let's see if we can add some data. So I'm just going to say I want to add some data to the database. And this is just an IntelliJ trick. You can create a method like this that you can just write the name of the method and then say create, and it will create the method for you. Okay? So rather than writing out all the code, I'm just going to copy the code from the last example code that I gave you. Paste that in and just talk about it for a minute. So this is just standard stuff here. We're creating an address and assign it to a new address, and then we set some values. We do the same thing for another one, And then now we're going to create this set of addresses. Remember over here in the customer class, we have this variable right here, right? Get addresses, and it's a set of addresses. So that's what we're going to create in the main class. And we're going to add this address to that set and add this other address to that set. And again, because it's a set, if we try to add this same thing twice, like address 2, for example, if we try to add that twice, it would reject it. So we've got that in there. And now what we want to do is create a customer. So we could say, this is one way we could do it. We could say customer, customer equals new customer. And in here we could give it, well, its first name, oops. And, you know what? In that list, I don't think we created a customer constructor. So there's a step we missed. All right, so I'll add that to the checklist, but we need to add a constructor here. So let's do a generate constructor, and we'll do one that takes these 2 parameters like that. And I believe we also should go ahead and create a constructor that takes no parameters. Okay, just to be safe. Okay, so now we got this one. We can come back over here to main.java. All right, so now we've created a customer, and now I can say that I want to, actually I could do customer dot set addresses. So we do it this way, like that, and then customer dot save. Okay. And actually, this needs to be the customer repository, and we do save the customer address. So that looks a little bit funny, the way that is, but remember the customer repository is actually what's called a data access object. And in the Spring framework and in J2EE, a data access object is an object that's related to the thing that we're trying to save or manipulate, and it has all the methods in it for creation, deletion, etc. It implements the CRUD operations. You don't have the CRUD operations in the class itself. So customer does not have the ability to save itself or delete itself. You do that through the data access object. Okay. All right, so now we have one of these in the database with our add data. And let's see, how would we print that out or do a query to print it out? Well, we could do something like up here. We could say, let's do it this way. We could say, in a loop, perhaps, we could say customer and now we're going to use the customer repository, and in this case we're going to do a find all. Okay, and now we can just say that we want to print it out. So we'll just do a system out, and in here we can just print the customer. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so we add the data and then we do that. Okay, and there we go. Okay, and now we're done. So we've built a small app that implements one-to-many using SpringBoot and JPA, and this should give us enough information to continue on and do more complex projects.